Welcome to Co-Pilot Podcasts. A 15-year-old girl is strapped to a cold metal table in an operating room. The doctors are laughing. The machine beside her stops beeping and holds a single flat tone. And then she is gone. Not into warmth, not into light, but into something she describes as darker than darkness, full of terror and oppression. Today, we are reading through a personal journal of a near-death experience, specifically what this young woman says she saw before the light, what happened when she called out a name in the dark, and what she came back believing with absolute certainty. By the end of this episode, you will understand the full arc of her account, from a skeptical teenager who had already given up on the world to someone who says she now knows Jesus personally. I've got someone here who has gone deep into this journal with me, and I want to start right at the beginning. Who is this?
So the journal is really clear about this. She sets up her mindset deliberately before she gets to the experience itself. She was a teenager who had already checked out. She describes watching the world around her and seeing people just chase things. Get up, go to school or work, get something, and then need to go get more. She writes, "Things wear out, things break, things go out of style. Is life all about the chase?" That was her framework at 15.
So she was already disillusioned before any of this.
Completely. She had given up on school. She describes herself as a runaway off and on. She was in a relationship, and at 15, she became pregnant. And she's upfront that the pregnancy was full of complications from early on.
And she also makes a point of saying she did not believe God was real at this point.
That's one of the most important things she establishes. She writes it plainly. "I did not believe that God was real until..." And then she describes what happened. She wasn't someone primed for a religious experience. She had no framework for it. That context matters a lot when you're reading what comes next.
Okay, so walk me through the medical situation. What was actually happening to her physically?
So at 7 months pregnant, her water started leaking. Little by little, she says. She went to the hospital multiple times. They gave her a paper test to confirm it was amniotic fluid. It confirmed it was. They gave her a shot and sent her home. This happened 2 or 3 more times. The hospital kept sending her away.
And she mentions the insurance situation.
Yeah, she does. She writes that her mother tried to get the doctors to keep her, but the doctors didn't like that her insurance wasn't the kind that would pay them well. She describes the nurses as mean, the doctors as mean. She was 15, scared, in pain, and being turned away repeatedly.
That's a brutal situation for anyone, let alone a 15-year-old.
Eventually, they kept her, ran ultrasounds, and found that her son was sitting inside what she describes as an empty water bag. The fluid had been draining for weeks. At that point, the 2 doctors decided to do an emergency C-section. She says she was so scared she was crying and saying she wanted to leave.
And then the operating room itself, the way she describes it is really striking.
It's one of the most vivid parts of the journal. She's on this cold, silver metal table, strapped down, and the doctors are joking around. She writes that they actually tilted the table sideways, almost upside down, while laughing. She was holding the sides, but her arms were strapped, so she was helpless. She remembers thinking, "What is wrong with these people? They are supposed to be doctors."
Wait, they tilted the table while she was strapped to it?
That's what she writes. And then they put a plastic mask over her face and told her to count and breathe. She counted, heard herself count, and then stopped. She felt a deep sleep come over her from the medication. But here's where it gets complicated. She writes that she felt everything in that surgery. She wasn't fully under.
She felt the surgery while it was happening.
She felt it, but was too heavily drugged to speak. She describes trying to speak and it coming out as weird sounds. She writes, it sounded like death. And then she hears one doctor calmly saying, "She needs oxygen," repeating it every few seconds. And then his voice shifts. He starts shouting, "Give her oxygen. She is dying. Why don't you give her oxygen?"
So the same doctors who were laughing and joking are now in a panic.
Exactly. And she writes that the machine beside her, which had been making short, high-pitched beeps, was now making a constant tone. That's the flat line. She was dying on that table at Grossmont Hospital in San Diego. She's specific about the location.
And this is where the experience begins.
This is where it gets really important to pay attention to the sequence, because it's not what most people expect. She doesn't go toward a warm light. The first place she goes is somewhere she describes as a place of demonic oppression and evil darkness. She writes that it was indescribable. Even to this day, she can only call it a place of demonic oppression and evil darkness. She says it was very, very real.
The darkness came first, That's not the typical near-death experience narrative people usually hear.
Right, and she seems aware of that. She references the Bible's concept of outer darkness and wonders if it might have been what the Bible calls Sheol. But she's careful to say she can't fully explain it. What she can say is that in this place, her thoughts were loud and racing. She was desperate to leave, and there was something pressing down on her, a heaviness that was trying to prevent her from answering a voice that was calling her name.
A voice was calling her name in the dark.
A calm, deep, loud voice. She describes it as caring, and she wanted to answer it, but something was stopping her. She writes that she had many questions, many fears, many concerns for her child back on Earth. She was torn.
So what breaks through? What changes the situation?
Her grandmother. In the middle of this dark place, she suddenly remembered her grandmother. And this is one of the most quietly powerful parts of the whole journal. She describes how when she was little, her grandmother would come visit and sleep over. She would go to bed, wake up, and find her grandmother already awake before sunrise, reading a big book. And she would think, what's so good about that big book anyway? And she talks about a person that no one can see.
There's something about that image, a grandmother reading before the sun comes up, that just lands differently when you know what it leads to.
It really does. And she remembered the name. The name of the person her grandmother talked about was Jesus. So there she is in this dark place, and this old memory surfaces with that name attached to it. And she shouted, she writes it in all caps, Jesus! Jesus! Is that you? Jesus!
And then what?
Instantly, she uses that word, instantly, she was in a bright, warm, wonderful place. She writes, warm, stretched out across the page. The pressure of time was gone. She couldn't see Jesus because, she writes, he was too bright.
She describes the love and peace there as unlike anything on earth.
She's very specific about that. She writes, oh, the love you feel. No, not like here. Like nothing ever felt here. And she describes a peace that was powerful, not a gentle, quiet peace, but something overwhelming. And then she describes something that I think is one of the most honest and unexpected parts of the account.
What's that?
She felt disgusted with herself. Standing in front of this presence, she says, you truly see what you are. She writes that her spirit looked like tar, dark, heavy, full of wrongs. She felt exposed. She knew herself fully in that moment. And yet, she writes, he still loved. That contrast, being fully seen in your worst self and still being loved, is what she keeps coming back to.
That's a really specific kind of experience. It's not just I felt good, it's I felt terrible about myself and loved at the same time.
Exactly. And she describes the communication itself as unlike anything here. She writes that he answered her questions before she could finish asking them. He knew her thoughts. And when he spoke, she didn't just hear the words, she felt them all around her. She writes, it was power, love, peace, even correction.
She asked him about the mean people, the ones who hurt others on purpose.
She did. And she writes that he told her he sees them. He knows everything people do, everything they want to do, everything they plan. He is sad for the evil in the world and glad for those who do good. Any good makes him happy. She writes that he said, we were made to do good, but don't always want it.
And then he quoted scripture to her, scripture she didn't know.
This is one of the details she emphasizes most. He recited what she later found out was Psalm 23. At the time, she had no idea what it was. She just heard this powerful, loving voice saying, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, all the way through. She didn't know it was in the Bible until later.
And the moment she found out, that's a story in itself.
It is, but we'll get there. First, he showed her something. He showed her her baby. She writes that they looked down through clouds and she could see her son in a clear plastic box, what sounds like a NICU incubator, with something like a white patch on his eyes, under a light, looking very yellow, covered in wires. She cried. She wanted to go to him, but didn't want to leave.
She was torn between staying and going back.
She writes, I did not want to leave this wonderful place, but he told her he had work for her to do. And he said, I will never leave. I will be with you always. She felt that it was time to go back. And then she was sent back into her body.
8 hours later.
8 hours later, she tried to wake up and sit up, but couldn't. A nurse said, I was waiting for you. Her chest ached like someone had crushed it. She laid back down.
And her first instinct was not to tell anyone.
She was afraid people would think she was crazy. She writes that she only wanted to tell her grandmother. And when she did tell her, her grandmother was so happy.
The grandmother who had been reading that big book before sunrise. The one who planted the name in her memory.
Exactly. And then comes the Psalm 23 moment. She started going to her grandmother's Bible study, a group of senior friends. One day, someone said they wanted to share a scripture and began reading Psalm 23. She writes that she jumped out of her chair so fast and blurted out, "That's what he said to me when I died."
She acknowledges that some people thought it was rude.
She does, and then she writes, and this is one of the more human moments in the whole journal, "But what would you do if this happened to you?" She's not defensive about it. She's almost amused. Like, of course she jumped up. What else would you do?
That's fair. I mean, genuinely, what would you do?
And she goes on to describe what her life looked like after. She writes that she's been on a journey figuring out what she was sent back to do. She describes being used as what she calls a seer, someone who hears God on behalf of others. She mentions being kept in obscurity for decades, under the poverty line, hidden away. She says God kept her by herself to protect her time and energy for whatever he wanted her to focus on.
That's a long time to carry something like this without being able to fully share it.
She's very aware of that. The journal opens with her saying she's had many obstacles, many activities, many good things busying her, causing her to push aside the writing of this book. She writes, "I am relieved to have this done." And then she says, "If Jesus was not so real, then it would be all too easy to get this testimony out, but we face much opposition." She calls it warfare.
She's describing the act of writing the journal itself as something she had to fight to complete.
Right, and she's explicit that she had no editor, no publishing company. She writes, "This is my journal, unedited, truth from my heart." She wanted it out before she died. She writes, "Life is short, time is of the essence. This message is too important to wait any longer. I will not take this to the grave."
There's an urgency to the whole thing that you feel, even in the way it's written.
The formatting itself reflects it. Capital letters, exclamation points, words stretched out. It reads like someone who has been holding something enormous for a very long time and is finally letting it out all at once.
I want to go back to something you said earlier about the darkness coming before the light, because I think that's actually the part of this account that most people wouldn't expect, and it changes the whole shape of the story.
It does. Most near-death experience accounts that get widely shared follow a certain pattern: the tunnel, the light, the warmth, the feeling of peace. This one starts in the opposite direction. She goes somewhere terrible first, and it's only when she remembers her grandmother's stories and calls out the name Jesus that the experience shifts completely.
And she's not subtle about what she thinks that means.
Not at all. She writes, "I suspect the same forces keep many people who don't know Jesus filled with questions, busied, and even unable to answer Jesus, or at least seek him for themselves." She's drawing a direct line between what she experienced in that dark place and what she sees happening in everyday life. People distracted, unable to reach toward something they might otherwise reach toward.
That's a pretty bold claim, that the same oppression she felt in that dark place is operating in ordinary life.
It is bold, and she knows it. She's not trying to be subtle or diplomatic about it. The whole journal is written with this sense of, I have seen something, I know it is real, and I cannot in good conscience keep it to myself. She writes, "I have a burden that leads me to share this now."
And she's also careful to say she's not sharing religion.
That's one of the more interesting distinctions she makes. She writes, "I will not share religion, religious practices, or traditions and rituals. I share a person, a very real person." She's drawing a line between institutional religion and a personal encounter. She even describes being walked through what she calls a strict church system and then out of it, so that her gifts could be developed in ways that she says man could not give her.
So she's not pointing people toward a denomination or a set of rules. She's pointing them toward a relationship.
That's exactly how she frames it. She writes, "Life is about relationships, and Jesus wants one with all upon the earth." And she connects that back to her original disillusionment as a teenager, the sense that life was just a chase for things. She writes that when she was with Jesus, she was so excited and relieved to find out that life was not really about getting a lot of stuff or competing. Life was made for a deeper purpose. Everything else is just extras.
That's a full circle from where she started. The teenager who looked at the world and saw nothing but people chasing things that wore out and broke.
And she came back with an answer to the question she had been asking. Not a philosophical answer, a personal one. She says she now knows Jesus. Not believes in, not hopes for, knows.
Let me ask you something. For someone reading this who doesn't share her beliefs, what do you think they're supposed to take from it?
I think the journal itself answers that. She's not writing to people who already agree with her. She's writing to people who are where she was, skeptical, disillusioned, maybe hurting. She writes, "Hurting heart that doesn't want him. He wants all to know him." She's addressing the person who has already decided this isn't for them.
And her argument is essentially, I was that person. I was the most unlikely candidate for this, and it still happened.
That's the core of it. She writes, "This happened to me at 15. This can happen to a teen or an adult. Do not wait." There's no softening of that. She's not saying consider it or look into it. She's saying, don't wait.
The urgency she felt about writing the journal is the same urgency she's trying to pass on to the reader.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this journal different from a lot of testimony accounts. It's not polished. It's not edited. It's not trying to be persuasive in a slick way. It's just someone saying, this is what happened to me. I know it was real and I cannot keep it to myself.
So when you step back from everything in this journal, the operating room, the darkness, the encounter, the return, the decades of carrying this, what does it really come down to?
It comes down to a 15-year-old who had already given up on the world, who flatlined on a table while doctors laughed, who went somewhere terrifying, and who found her way out of it by remembering a name her grandmother used to sing about before sunrise. And she came back completely changed. Not gradually, not over years of spiritual practice. Instantly.
And she spent decades trying to figure out what to do with that.
Hidden away, under the poverty line, by her own account. Not famous, not celebrated. Just carrying this thing and trying to be faithful to what she says she was sent back to do, and eventually writing it all down in an unedited journal because she refused to take it to the grave.
There's something in that grandmother detail that I keep coming back to. She didn't grow up in a household where faith was central, but there was this one person, reading before the sun came up, singing about someone no one could see, and that quiet, consistent presence was the thing that saved her life. Literally, in a dark place she couldn't have imagined.
And the grandmother never knew that in the moment. She was just doing what she did every morning, reading her big book, singing her songs. She had no idea that those mornings were being stored somewhere in her granddaughter's memory, waiting for the exact moment they would be needed.
That's the part of this that I think lands regardless of where you stand on the spiritual claims. The idea that what you do quietly, consistently, when no one seems to be watching, it matters. It goes somewhere.
She would say it goes further than you can imagine, and she would say the same about the name she called out in the dark. She writes that she now knows Jesus, not as a concept, not as a religious figure, but as a person she met. That's the claim she's staking her entire life on.
Here's what this really comes down to. A girl who didn't believe God was real flatlined on a cold metal table at 15. She went somewhere dark and terrifying. She called out a name she barely remembered from her grandmother's mornings. And she came back saying she now knows Jesus, not believes, not hopes, knows. She spent decades in obscurity carrying that and finally wrote it all down in an unedited journal because she said the message was too important to wait. Whatever you believe about what happened on that table, the journal is a record of someone who was permanently and completely changed by it. And the question she's really asking every reader is the same one she was asked in that bright, warm place. Do you want to stay? Or do you want to go back and do the work?
And she would say, you don't have to flatline to find out the answer.
That's the whole point of the journal. She went so you don't have to wonder. Thanks for being here for this one on Co-Pilot Podcasts. This one stays with you.